I lost everything in one day. Not slowly. Not over time. In one single day, my company was taken from me, my bank accounts were frozen, a sheriff taped an eviction notice to my front door, and the woman I loved packed her bags and walked away without even looking back. By sunset, I wasn't a respected business owner anymore. I was a headline. They said I committed fraud. They said I was reckless. They said I was unstable. And the worst part? I didn't fight back. I didn't go online to defend myself. I didn't argue publicly. I didn't beg anyone to believe my side of the story. I went silent. While they watched me fall, while they whispered about my collapse, while they stepped into the positions I built, I was sitting in a small motel room with $70 left in my pocket, trying to understand how everything disappeared so fast. No house. No reputation. No partner. No wife. Just skill, discipline, and time. And here's what nobody tells you about losing everything: when the noise fades and the world moves on, that's when the real work begins. Because silence isn't weakness. Silence is preparation. 5 months later, the same people who removed me were asking me to come back. Not because I shouted. Not because I exposed them. But because I rebuilt quietly while they underestimated me. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about leverage. It's about identity. It's about what happens when a man loses everything that can be taken, and discovers the one thing that can't. So if you've ever been doubted, erased, betrayed, or left behind when things got hard, stay with me. Because what I learned in that motel room changed the way I build, the way I trust, and the way I move forever. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. My name is Michael Thompson. I am 50 years old, and for most of my life I believed that if you worked hard enough and stayed disciplined long enough, nothing could take away what you built. I believed stability was earned. I believed loyalty meant protection. I believed that if you built something brick by brick, no one could quietly remove the foundation beneath you. I was wrong. 5 months ago, I lost everything in one day. Not slowly. Not gradually. Not in a long decline that I could prepare for. In one single day, the company I built from nothing was taken from me, my bank accounts were frozen, my name was dragged through quiet business circles, my home was placed under foreclosure, and my wife packed a suitcase and left. But before that day, my life looked solid. I built Thompson Logistics with 2 used trucks and a small rented warehouse on the edge of town. I worked long hours. Sometimes I slept inside the office when deadlines were tight. I did not chase quick money. I chased structure. I believed in clear systems, organized routes, and steady growth. My partner, David Parker, handled expansion. He was smooth, confident, and persuasive. He could sell a vision before the numbers were fully formed. Investors liked him. Clients liked him. I liked him. Together, we grew faster than we expected. 2 trucks became 18. 1 warehouse contract became 6 major regional agreements. Our company name started appearing in industry newsletters. We were invited to networking dinners. Banks approved larger credit lines without hesitation. At home, my wife Sarah enjoyed the change. We upgraded our house. We attended formal events. She stood beside me in tailored dresses while I spoke about operational growth and disciplined expansion. She would squeeze my hand and whisper, "I'm proud of you." I thought we were building something permanent. I thought once you reached stability, it stayed. The morning everything collapsed did not feel dramatic. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., like I had for years. Discipline was my identity. Sarah was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed scrolling through her phone. She did not say good morning. That should have meant something. But when life feels secure, you ignore small signals. At 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. It was our bank. The voice on the other end was calm but formal. She informed me that over $800,000 had been transferred from our operating account over the last 6 weeks under my digital authorization. I laughed at first. I thought it was a system mistake. Then I logged in. The balance showed less than $15,000. Payroll was due in 4 days. Fuel contracts were active. Insurance payments were pending. I refreshed the page 3 times. The number did not change. I called David immediately. No answer. I sent a message. No reply. A tight feeling settled in my chest. Not panic. Recognition. I drove to the office. Security stopped me at the entrance. Mr. Thompson, we've been instructed that you are not allowed inside at this time. For a moment, I thought it was a misunderstanding. 10 minutes later, David walked out of the building in a tailored suit, calm and composed. Michael, he said softly, this is temporary. Temporary. That word can destroy a man's position in seconds. Compliance officers questioned me in the parking lot. In front of my employees. People I had hired from scratch. They asked about financial transfers I never authorized. They used phrases like risk exposure and internal review. Employees stood in small groups watching. Respect turned into uncertainty within minutes. By noon, 3 clients paused contracts. By evening, industry chat groups were circulating rumors. By night, Sarah sat at the dining table with documents spread in front of her. Corporate restructuring agreements. Ownership adjustments. Liability clauses. My signature appeared on pages I had never seen. David had quietly shifted majority ownership during expansion negotiations. I had trusted him to handle investor paperwork while I focused on operations. I signed digital approvals without reviewing every clause because I believed in partnership. That trust cost me control. The documents positioned me as responsible for high-risk financial transfers. On paper, I looked reckless. On paper, he looked like the stabilizer stepping in to protect the company. I didn't sign this, I told Sarah. Your name is on it, she replied quietly. She did not accuse me. But she did not defend me either. That hesitation hurt more than the documents. The next morning, our personal and business accounts were frozen. Payroll failed. Employees began texting in panic. Vendors demanded immediate payment. Then the final blow arrived. Foreclosure notice. Hidden inside restructuring agreements were leverage clauses connecting company debt exposure to personal property. Our home. 72 hours to vacate if obligations were not satisfied. A sheriff taped the eviction notice to my front door while my neighbor pretended not to stare. In less than 48 hours, I lost operational control of my company, financial access, public trust, my house, and my wife's confidence. That night, Sarah packed a suitcase. I need time, she said. When the private investment group called me back for a second meeting, I understood something had shifted. This was no longer about small consulting work. This was about influence. 3 months earlier, I had been sitting in a motel room with $73 and an eviction notice in my hand. Now I was sitting across from investors who were asking how I stabilized companies in 60 days without increasing overhead. I did not exaggerate my answers. I spoke calmly. I explained systems. I explained discipline. I explained structure. I told them something simple. Speed without protection creates collapse. Stability comes from clarity. They listened carefully. A week later, they offered me an advisory position with performance-based compensation. If I improved operational margins, would receive equity participation in future acquisitions. Equity. That word felt different now. Before my collapse, equity meant status. Growth. Expansion. Now it meant control. I reviewed the contract slowly. Line by line. No blind trust. No rushed signatures. No assumption that partnership meant safety. When I signed it as a different man. The first company I was assigned to review was a struggling logistics firm 2 counties away. They had grown too quickly under aggressive leadership. Warehouse space exceeded need. Delivery routes overlapped inefficiently. Staff morale was unstable. It felt familiar. I worked quietly. I did not announce bold changes. I studied their systems. I restructured scheduling. I eliminated redundant costs. Within 6 weeks, their margins improved by 12%. The investors were impressed. But what mattered more was something else. Confidence returned inside me. Meanwhile, word reached me through former colleagues that Thompson Logistics was beginning to feel pressure. David had signed 2 large warehouse contracts that required heavy upfront costs. Payroll was clearing late. Vendors were shortening payment terms. He was expanding to prove strength. But expansion without discipline always creates strain. One evening, I received a call from Marcus, one of my former senior managers. "Things are tense," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked. "Growth is strong on paper, but cash is tight. Some suppliers are nervous." I did not celebrate. I did not criticize. I simply listened. Pressure reveals leadership. If David had built his authority through structural dominance rather than loyalty, pressure would expose cracks. A month later, I received a message from one of the minority investors at Thompson Logistics. The message was short. "We need to talk." We met at a quiet restaurant outside the city. He looked older than I remembered. "Stress changes people. Michael," he said, "the company is growing fast, but stability is thin. We need operational grounding." I remained calm. "I am not involved anymore," I replied. "I know," he said. "But investors remember who built the backbone." That sentence lingered in the air. He was not asking me to return yet. He was assessing possibility. That is how power shifts, quietly. Back at my apartment that night, I thought carefully. If I returned emotionally, I would repeat my mistakes. If I returned strategically, I could correct them. Sarah called later that evening. "I heard investors are nervous," she said. "Where did you hear that?" I asked. "People talk." She paused. "I didn't understand what you were building before." "I see it now." "What do you see?" "You're calmer." "I'm clearer," I answered. There is a difference between calm and clarity. Calm can hide weakness. Clarity creates strength. Over the next 2 months, my work with the investment group expanded. I was now advising on 2 struggling logistics firms. In both cases, I applied the same principle. Stabilize before expanding. Measure before signing. Protect before promising. Margins improved steadily. My reputation was rebuilding. Not in public headlines, but in private decision rooms. Meanwhile, Thompson Logistics began to face internal questions. Investors demanded clearer financial reporting. Vendors requested guaranteed payment schedules. Expansion slowed under pressure. One afternoon, David called me directly. His voice was steady but controlled. "We should talk," he said. I agreed to meet. We chose a neutral location, a corporate office downtown. He looked different than before. Still confident, but tighter. Controlled. "Things have shifted," he said. "I've heard," I replied. "They're questioning growth strategy." "Growth requires liquidity," I said calmly. He studied me. "You've been advising other firms." "Yes." "They're performing well." "Yes." He leaned back slightly. They're considering restructuring. And? I asked. They may ask you to return. I did not respond immediately. What would you do? He asked. Return differently, I said. How? With structure. He nodded slowly. You've changed. I had to. There was no anger in the room. Only awareness. Within weeks, the board scheduled a formal meeting. I entered the building I once owned with a different mindset. No ego. No desperation. Just leverage. The board members presented financial reports. Growth was visible, but liquidity stress was increasing. Risk exposure was rising. They turned to me. Would you consider returning under revised governance? One member asked. This time, I did not speak emotionally. I will return under 3 conditions, I said. Full operational authority. Transparent financial oversight. And veto power over high-risk expansion. Silence filled the room. These were the protections I ignored before. Now they were non-negotiable. After internal deliberation, the board voted. Operational control transferred back to me. David remained a shareholder. But strategy now required structure. The first morning I walked back into Thompson Logistics felt different from the first time I was locked out. There was no humiliation. There was clarity. I gathered senior managers and spoke plainly. We will grow, I said. But we will protect growth. I froze 2 high-risk expansion contracts immediately. I renegotiated vendor terms. I tightened reporting systems. I implemented dual authorization protocols for large transfers. No blind spots. Within 60 days, liquidity stabilized. Vendor confidence returned. Investor anxiety decreased. Revenue did not explode. It steadied. David approached me one evening after hours. You could have removed me, he said. Yes, I answered. But you didn't. No. Why? Because destruction wastes time. Correction builds strength. He looked at me carefully. I underestimated you. You underestimated structure. He nodded slowly. In that moment, I realized something important. Revenge is loud. Leverage is quiet. I did not need to destroy him. The structure I rebuilt was stronger than any personal victory. At home, Sarah and I continued rebuilding carefully. Not with dramatic declarations. With honesty. I thought silence meant you were defeated, she admitted one night. Silence meant I was learning, I replied. Trust rebuilt slowly. Like business. With boundaries. With clarity. With protection. Months passed. Thompson Logistics became healthier than before the collapse. Not larger. Not louder. Healthier. And I understood the lesson completely. I did not lose everything. I lost illusion. Position can be taken. Skill cannot. Authority can shift. Capacity remains. And once you understand your capacity, you stop fearing the fall. That was my revenge. Not anger. Not destruction. Control. Control feels different when you earn it back. When I returned to Thompson Logistics under new governance, I did not feel powerful. I felt responsible. Responsibility is heavier than authority. Authority can impress people. Responsibility forces you to think carefully before every decision. In the first weeks after my return, I noticed something subtle. Employees were polite, but cautious. They were not sure if I was temporary again. They were not sure which leadership voice would dominate. Stability does not return because of a vote. It returns because of consistency. So I focused on consistency. Every morning, I walked through the warehouse floor. I spoke to drivers directly. I asked supervisors questions without accusation. I listened more than I talked. I made no sudden moves. No dramatic announcements. Only steady adjustments. David watched from a distance. He still held ownership shares. He still attended board meetings. But something inside him had shifted. He was no longer certain. Expansion had once been his weapon. Now caution was mine. One evening, after most employees had left, he entered my office and closed the door behind him. "You've changed the rhythm," he said. "I've restored balance," I replied. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They trust you. They trust structure." He studied my face for a long moment. "Do you hate me?" he asked. The question surprised me. "No," I said calmly. "You should. Hate requires energy I don't have." He looked down briefly. "I thought you would collapse," he admitted. "I almost did," I said. That was the first time I had spoken those words aloud. He looked up quickly. "You didn't show it." "I didn't show it to you." There is something powerful about admitting vulnerability without losing composure. It unsettles people. It removes the illusion of control. David was not evil. He was ambitious. And ambition without discipline becomes dangerous. When he realized I was not reacting emotionally, something inside him weakened. Pressure began to affect him differently. Board meetings grew tense. Investors questioned his expansion projections. Liquidity reports were examined carefully. He spoke less confidently now. Not because he lacked intelligence, but because certainty had left him. At home, Sarah began visiting more often. We did not rush reconciliation. We rebuilt slowly. Sometimes we would sit at the small kitchen table in my apartment and talk quietly. "I didn't know how to stand beside uncertainty," she said one evening. "Uncertainty reveals loyalty," I replied. I was afraid of losing everything. I already did. She reached across the table and held my hand. "I see you differently now." "How?" "You don't need the company to feel whole." That sentence mattered. Before the collapse, my identity was tied to the business. My schedule, my confidence, my self-worth, all connected to performance and growth. Losing everything stripped that away. In the motel room, I discovered something uncomfortable but freeing. If your identity depends on position, you are always fragile. Now I walked into the office knowing something deeper. If this company disappeared tomorrow, I would build again. Not because I wanted to prove something. Because I understood structure now. One afternoon, an investor requested a private meeting. His tone was direct. "We're concerned about leadership tension," he said. "Can this partnership survive?" I understood what he meant. He was asking whether David and I could coexist without conflict destabilizing the company again. "It will survive," I said, "if structure leads instead of ego." He nodded slowly. Later that week, David requested another conversation. This time, his voice carried something unfamiliar. Fatigue. "I underestimated the weight of control," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "When I removed you, I thought expansion would secure loyalty. Instead, it increased pressure." "Speed magnifies risk," I said. He sat down across from me. "I wanted to prove I could lead alone." "And?" I asked. "It's harder than it looks." There was no arrogance left in his tone. Just honesty. That was the psychological shift. When someone believes they must win at all costs, they become rigid. When they realize winning cost them stability, they soften. Over the next months, I continued tightening systems. I introduced layered approval processes. No single executive could authorize large transfers alone. Expansion contracts required dual review. Financial transparency reports were shared weekly instead of quarterly. Not because I distrusted David. Because I no longer trusted blind spots. Gradually, the tension between us changed. It did not become friendship again. It became professionalism. One evening, as we reviewed quarterly projections, he looked at me and said, "If you had reacted emotionally, this company would have collapsed." "Yes," I replied. "Why didn't you?" I paused before answering. Because I realized something in that motel room. What? Destruction feels satisfying in the moment. But correction builds something lasting. He nodded slowly. That was the revenge he never expected. I did not destroy him publicly. I outgrew him privately. Meanwhile, Sarah and I moved carefully toward rebuilding our marriage. We attended counseling. We spoke openly about fear, pride, and trust. She admitted she had doubted me when she saw my name on those documents. "I thought silence meant guilt," she said. "Silence meant preparation," I answered. Trust returned gradually, not through promises but through behavior. She saw my routine. My discipline. My clarity. She saw that I was no longer reactive. And that changed her perspective. The company stabilized fully by the end of the year. Revenue was steady. Debt manageable. Expansion measured. But something more important had happened. I no longer needed validation. That is a dangerous place for a man who once feared losing everything. When you stop fearing loss, you become calm under pressure. When you become calm, you make better decisions. When you make better decisions, you gain control. One final board meeting marked the true shift. Investors praised the new stability model. Risk exposure had decreased significantly. Operational margins were consistent. One member turned to David and said, "This partnership works better balanced." He did not argue. He looked at me briefly and nodded. After the meeting, as we walked out of the building together, he spoke quietly. "I tried to win. And?" I asked. "I almost lost everything." I looked at him carefully. "I did lose everything," I said. "Yes," he replied. "And you came back stronger." That was not surrender. It was recognition. Months later, Sarah and I moved back into a modest home. Not the large house we lost. Something simpler. Something earned cleanly. One evening, standing in the quiet living room, she said softly, "Losing everything changed you." "Yes." "For better?" "Yes." "How?" "I no longer build for status. I build for stability." That was the difference. Before, growth meant proof. Now, growth meant protection. Before, partnership meant trust. Now, partnership meant verification. Before, silence meant weakness. Now, silence meant strength. If you had asked me before the collapse what my greatest fear was, I would have said losing the company. Now I understand something deeper. The real danger was building without protection. The collapse was not punishment. It was correction. And correction, when accepted instead of resisted, becomes transformation. I lost everything in one day. But I gained something stronger in the quiet that followed. Clarity. And clarity is power. Time feels like distance when everything is falling. She left quietly. I loaded 2 suitcases into my car and drove to a roadside motel 15 minutes outside the city. Room 214. Thin walls. 1 bed. A small desk. A mirror above the sink. I sat on the edge of that bed and stared at the carpet for a long time. Silence feels different when you have nothing left to lose. Most people think rock bottom is loud. It is not. It is quiet. And in that quiet, you confront yourself. I did not go online to defend myself. I did not shout. I did not threaten lawsuits. I went silent. Because noise would have made me look desperate. And desperation would have confirmed their narrative. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., I woke up in that motel room. I did push-ups on the floor. I took cold showers. I wrote in a notebook. One question. How did he win? Not how did I lose. How did he win? The answer was painful. He exploited my blind spots. I built strong operations but weak protection. I trusted loyalty instead of verifying structure. I focused on growth instead of ownership control. It was not just betrayal. It was miscalculation. Once I accepted that, anger faded. Clarity replaced it. And clarity is dangerous. Clarity is dangerous because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. In that motel room, with nothing left but silence and a cheap lamp buzzing above my head, I stopped blaming David. I stopped replaying the betrayal. I stopped asking why he did it. I started asking something better. What did I ignore? That question changed everything. For years, I believed hard work protected me. I believed loyalty was earned through time. I believed partnership meant alignment. But partnership without protection is vulnerability. I had given David expansion authority because I trusted his ambition. I signed documents quickly because I trusted his judgment. I focused on trucks, drivers, routes, and fuel efficiency while he focused on investors, contracts, and growth. I built the machine. He built the ownership. And ownership controls everything. The first few nights in the motel were heavy. Not dramatic. Just heavy. The silence forced thoughts to become louder. I replayed the moment security stopped me at my own office. I replayed the look in Sarah's eyes when she saw my name on documents I had never reviewed properly. I replayed the sheriff placing that notice on my door. Humiliation does not shout. It settles into your chest. But something unexpected happened after the third morning. The pain stopped feeling sharp. It started feeling instructional. I looked at my reflection in the motel mirror and saw something important. I was still the same man who built 2 trucks into 18. I was still the same man who optimized routes and cut operational waste by 15% in the first year. I was still the same man who trained managers and stabilized chaotic warehouses. The company was taken. But the builder was not. That distinction matters. On the 4th day, I opened my laptop and began researching small logistics firms in nearby counties. Companies that were struggling. Companies that could not afford large consulting firms. Companies that needed structure but did not have it. I created a simple consulting profile under M. Thompson. No dramatic story. No mention of collapse. Just services, operational efficiency, route optimization, warehouse system improvement. I sent 5 emails that day. 4 ignored me. 1 responded. It was a small regional delivery company with 12 trucks. Their fuel costs were high. Their delivery timing was inconsistent. Their manager admitted they were losing contracts because of missed windows. We met at a diner halfway between the city and their warehouse. The owner was cautious. He had heard the rumors about my company. He did not say it directly, but I could see it in his eyes. "Why are you available?" he asked. I answered honestly. "Because I made structural mistakes in my own business. I won't make them again. But I can fix operational ones." He studied me for a moment. Then he agreed to a short-term trial contract. The payment was small compared to what I used to handle. But it was enough. That week, I reviewed their delivery routes. I reorganized loading sequences. I eliminated unnecessary mileage. Within 2 weeks, their fuel expenses dropped by 11%. The owner called me late one evening. "I don't know what you changed," he said, "but it's working." That sentence was the first real breath I had taken in weeks. It was not about the money. It was about confirmation. I still knew how to build. I extended my motel stay another week. Not because I was stuck. Because I was planning. Each morning became consistent. Wake up. Exercise. Cold shower. Work. Study. Review contracts more carefully than I ever had before. I began educating myself on legal structures, ownership protections, layered approval systems. I realized how careless I had been with expansion documentation. Success had made me comfortable. Comfort had made me blind. By the end of the month, I had 3 small consulting clients. Word travels quickly in small business circles. One satisfied owner tells another. Results spread quietly. Meanwhile, I heard through old contacts that Thompson Logistics was expanding rapidly. David was signing aggressive warehouse agreements. Publicly, it looked strong. Internally, I knew what rapid expansion without stable liquidity feels like. Pressure. Speed hides cracks temporarily. But cracks widen under stress. One afternoon, I received a call from one of my former supervisors. He hesitated before speaking. "It's not the same without you," he said. "Things are fast. Too fast." I did not criticize David. I did not offer commentary. I simply said, "Focus on your job. Stability always wins over speed." That night, I lay in the motel bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time since the collapse, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like a student. Losing everything forced me to separate 2 things I had blended together for years: identity and position. My position was CEO. My identity was builder. Position can be removed. Identity must be protected. When you confuse the 2, collapse feels like death. When you separate them, collapse feels like instruction. Within 6 weeks, I had enough income to leave the motel. I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It was not impressive. But it was mine. No leverage. No shared clauses. No hidden liabilities. The first night in that apartment felt different. Not triumphant. Grounded. Sarah called unexpectedly 2 weeks later. Her voice sounded uncertain. "I heard you're working," she said. "Yes." "With who?" "Smaller firms." There was a pause. "I didn't think you'd recover this fast." I smiled slightly. "I didn't collapse," I said. "I recalculated." Silence. "I was scared," she admitted. "I know. I thought the documents meant something else. They meant I trusted too quickly." Another pause. "Are you angry with me?" The honest answer was complicated. "I was hurt," I said. "Now I'm focused." Focus is stronger than anger. After that call, I realized something else. Not everyone leaves because they don't care. Some leave because they fear instability. But stability must come from within first. By the 3rd month, one of my consulting clients referred me to a mid-sized regional distributor struggling with warehouse inefficiency. That contract was larger. The payment significant. The expectations high. I delivered measurable improvements within 30 days. And then something shifted. I received an email from a private investment group that specialized in acquiring struggling logistics companies. They had heard about my operational restructuring work. They requested a meeting. In a quiet office downtown, I sat across from 3 investors who did not care about my fall. They cared about data. "Can you stabilize a company in 60 days?" one of them asked. "Yes," I replied. "How certain are you?" "I've already done it." Confidence feels different when it's built from loss. They offered me a short-term advisory role. This was no longer survival. This was leverage rebuilding. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. The day I lost everything was not the end of my story. It was the removal of illusion. I thought security came from ownership. It comes from ability. I thought loyalty came from history. It comes from structure. I thought success protected me. It exposed me. As I walked back to my small apartment that evening, I felt something I had not felt in months. Not pride. Control. David had taken my position. He had taken the company name. He had taken public authority. But he had not taken my capacity. And capacity, when refined by discipline and clarity, becomes something far more powerful than title. It becomes independence. That was the moment my comeback truly began. Not in a boardroom. Not in revenge. But in quiet control.